What could be better than taking courses in high school that can get you credit in college? That's exactly what happens when you take an advanced placement class. High school students in Prince George's County now have a minimum of 8 advanced placement course opportunities and oftentimes more at whatever high school they attend. The highly rigorous classes not only offer the promise of college credit if a score of 3 or higher is achieved, but the experience is an invaluable academic transition to college life itself. With the school system now paying for all AP exam fees, formerly a burden on each student, the lure of AP's college-level courses is almost irresistible. To better prepare students to succeed on the AP exams and thus increase their likelihood of earning college credit, listen to the following test experts. Since each one has had long experience in scoring the AP exams, their advice and insights on how the tests are formatted, what test-taking strategies work best, and how to successfully prepare for the tests all come from practiced professionals. The Prince George's Schools appreciates the efforts of the College Board, which helped arrange for the people you're about to meet in the 8 episodes of this series.
Hello, I'm Bob Nuxall. I've taught for over 35 years. I've taught advanced placement courses for over 20, and since its inception I've been teaching the advanced placement world history. I also score the essays for the College Board, and I've done other work going into districts to help them prepare for the test. Today specifically, I will be going over the course material very briefly. I'm going to do an intensive amount of work on the test itself because I have a lot of experience there. And then briefly again at the end, I will go over the review techniques that you will need. The course itself, AP World History. What makes it different from the other courses in advanced placement is that it deals with regions of the world. It then deals with periodization, meaning it breaks all history down into a group of time periods and deals with them individually rather than countries. It puts an enormous amount of emphasis on point of view. And then continuities and differences over time and between peoples. One of the things that makes it a college-level course is its emphasis on analysis. Not recitation or speculation, analysis. We'll get into what that means. And then, as you know, with all of the AP history courses, the use and interpretation of documents. Let's start with the regions. Where can you find the world regions? Go online to apcentral.collegeboard.com. apcentral.collegeboard.com. Once you arrive there, find the World History course. And there you will find the curriculum, you will find a map of the regions of the world, you'll even find a great deal about the test itself and samples of the test. This is a tremendous resource. But the regions of the world, it's an absolute must that you go there. The reason I say that is none of the textbooks breaks the world down into the regions in a way that is adequate for the advanced placement test. So you must go to their map and work with other maps. Here, these are the world regions as the College Board looks at them. Obviously, I can't spend time going over them here. And you would find if your teacher spent a great deal of time on this in class, there would be many other things you wouldn't get to. This really has to be your work. You have to go to that AP Central. You have to look at that map of the world and the world's regions, And then you have to look at other maps until you are very familiar with what is East Asia, what is Southeast Asia, what is South Asia, etc., going across the world. So that when these terms are used, they must be used precisely by you. In a recent test, there was a question about, an essay question, about Southeast Asia. A great number of students, in answering that, spoke of Southern Asia, which would include the Middle East, India, and Southeast Asia. And we couldn't count anything that they said in that answer, because in most cases, they ended up talking about India. They did not realize Southeast Asia is a unique region. You must be familiar with these, and we don't have the time here to do it. You've got to go to AP Central. That has to be your job. Periodization. Hopefully by now you know that this course breaks the history of the world down into these 5 time periods. Everything up until 600 in the current era, which is the same as AD, I assume you know. From 600 to 1450, and etc. If you look at this, you would say the foundations unit, the first unit that you do, includes everything up to Muhammad. The second unit, 600 to 1450, deals with the spread of Islam up to the beginning of world exploration. 1450 to 1750 deals with the modernization of the world. 1750 to 1914 deals with the Industrial Revolution, and then, of course, the present. What are the parts of the test? 70 multiple choice questions, 3 essays, DBQ, the document-based question, change over time, or CCOT, change in continuity over time, and the comparative. You must do all of these. There's no choice. I assume you know that your final score in the test is 1 to 5. Approximately 10% of students will get 5. The next 15 to 20% will get 4s. The middle, 30 to 40%, will get 3s. About 20% 2s and about 20% 1s, or thereabouts. But in order to arrive at that score, there is a raw score that the College Board uses. And this is the way this raw score is arrived at. Half of it, 50%, is the multiple choice. Then each of the 3 essays, the comparative essay, change over time, and the document page, each worth approximately 17%, or 1/3 of the remaining of 50%. Why is that important? You must answer all 3 of these. If you spend too much time on any one, it means less time spent on the others. Where does the material come from? For the whole test, this is the spread. About 20% to 600. The second unit, 600 to 1450. 22%. Then 19%, 19, and 20. They're just about equal, aren't they? That, when you're reviewing for the test, that you should remember. That although the 600 to 1450 gets the greatest emphasis, it is only 22%. So that when you're allotting your review time, you should keep this in mind. That you should leave nothing blank. You have to know all of these. Now, students will ask, is this for the essays or for the multiple choice? It's for the test as a whole. So for example, if the comparative essay was going to focus on the period 600 to 1450, you would find very few of the multiple choice questions in that period. They try to stay very close to these percentages, so that if you get an essay that emphasizes one of these, you're going to find fewer multiple choice questions in that time period. You can't leave anything completely blank. Let's look first at the multiple choice. 70 questions, 55 minutes. 55 minutes for 70 questions. That comes out to 40 seconds for each. Actually, that's plenty of time, unless you look at a question and you can't understand it and you start to dwell on it. Every year, I will hear of students who encountered 2 or 3 questions that they couldn't understand, and they spent several minutes on those. And what do they find? They glance up at the clock, and they have 5 minutes left for the multiple choice, and they have 20 or 25 questions to go. No, you can't linger over any question. If you are in doubt, skip it and come back to it. But don't lose your place on the test. Make sure you're aware of that. If you don't have time, you don't have time. Should you answer all the questions? To understand the answer to that, you look at the way the multiple choice questions are scored. Your multiple choice score is the number correct less 1/4 point penalty for each wrong answer. So if you get a question right, you get a point. If you leave it blank, you don't get the point. If you answer it incorrectly, you don't get that point, plus 1/4 point is taken off. What does this mean? It means you should make no wild guesses. If you have no idea what a question means, and there will be some that everybody will come across, that they'll have no idea, skip it. A wild guess will work against you. But there are 5 possible answers to each question. If you can eliminate 2 or 3 of them, if you're looking at it, you say, it's got to be A or C, then guess between A and C. That will be to your benefit. You shouldn't leave it blank if you can eliminate that much. You're playing the odds in that case. Some people will look at tactics like this and they'll say, isn't that sort of like cheating? No. Other students who are taking the test who are competing with you, they all know these rules, and they're taking advantage of it. This just levels the playing field so that everybody knows what they have to do. Your essays. There is no choice in the essays. There are 3 essays there. You must answer all 3. There's usually a choice within the essay. When is there not? Let us say that they decide to ask an essay about the effects of the Atlantic slave trade on both Africa and the Americas. Very likely they will give you no choice of what you should be focusing on in either Africa or the Americas. Why? They would assume everybody taking this course knows that pretty well. But in areas where everybody may not have covered it in depth, or some textbooks don't cover it in depth, they're going to give you a choice. And that is most of the of the essay. So there's no choice of whether to answer an essay or not. But there usually, key word there, usually, is a choice within the essay. Don't panic if it's not, if there isn't that choice. Take a good look at it, you'll see this is probably a fairly easy question to answer. That's why there is no choice. How are essays scored? This is where perhaps I have my best background. I've scored European history essays for 5 years. Every year since the world history exam started, I've been scoring those essays. And one of the things that I'm often called upon to do is go into different districts to help them specifically with the essays. So this is perhaps the area that I could be most helpful to you in. The core scoring. There are 7 points in a basic core. You either get them or you don't, each one. Then there are 2 points for the expanded core. You must earn all the basic core points to be eligible for the expanded core points. And here, you cannot lose points. You either earn the point or you don't earn it. And when we start looking at the rubric, the way, the rules for scoring each type of essay, you'll see why that's important. Let's look first at the document-based question. It's going to have 5 to 8 documents. Here, use them to answer the question. The question, or the DBQ, is not about merely interpreting documents. That's only the beginning. The most important thing is you must use the information in those documents to answer the question. How is the DBQ scored? You get 1 point for having an acceptable thesis. If it's a good thesis or acceptable, you get the point. If everything else you do is nonsense, you still get that point. If they look at your thesis, that's what we mean by you can't lose a point. If they look at your thesis and say, that's pretty good, that's acceptable, and we'll look at exactly what we mean by that, you're getting the point, even if everything else that follows would make it look like you don't even understand the question. No, they can't take any points away from you. Okay. If you use all documents and you understand almost all of them, in other words, you're not misinterpreting them, you get a point. There you see 2 of these 7. Then, this is where you have to go back to the question. You must take appropriate evidence from the documents, from all but one document, and apply it to the answer to the question. If you're just listing the documents and interpreting them, you can't get that point, or those points. If you do it for all but 2 of the documents, you get 1 point. You do it for all or all but 1, you get the 2 points. You get a point for pointing out the point of view, and we will get into exactly what that means. The point of view in at least 2 documents. Very important. Then, analytical grouping of the documents. You get a point for that. We'll look at that in detail too. And then identifying the need for an additional document. There are the 7 points. There's no hedging here. You either get that point or you don't. A scorer cannot look at it and say, oh, this is pretty good, I'm going to give it 3 points. No. They have to base it specifically on the standards for that point in the basic core. What do we mean by an acceptable thesis? One of the biggest mistakes that students make is they don't really understand this. If you go back to junior high or middle school, You learned there from a very well-meaning English teacher that you could put together a thesis statement by merely taking the question and restating it as a declarative sentence. That was good in middle school. This is a college-level course. A thesis must say something. It has to go beyond that. Notice it really says something. Let's take an example. And forgive me if I dwell on this. The very first world history AP test, the document-based question, had to do with attitudes towards merchants and trade in the Muslim world and in the Christian world. And they gave you 8 documents that you had to use. Many students, in answering that, looked at it and said, and they really thought they were writing a thesis statement when they said this, in some ways, the Christians and the Muslims viewed trade and wealth in a similar manner. And in some ways, they didn't. Many of those students thought they had written a real thesis. They had not. Why not? It doesn't say anything. It doesn't say anything based upon the documents that you had there. What would have been an acceptable statement? Something that says even something very minimal. Christians originally didn't trust merchants. Muslims did. That is a thesis statement. A very simple one. But it says something. It goes beyond a mere rewording of the question. That's very important. We'll come back to that very briefly at the end. Next. I'm sure you've heard this expression. I hope you have. No laundry list. Don't say document 1 says, document 2 says, document 3 says. No, instead of that, you must take each document and explain it in a way that relates it to the question. It does not just say what the document says. Laundry list like, 3 shirts, 2 pants, 3 socks. No, that's what we mean by laundry list. But you have to, and you'll see when we look at grouping, you'll see, I think you'll get a better understanding what we mean by avoiding the laundry list. Use the documents. Don't just repeat the documents. Use them to answer the question. I often, when I'm scoring tests, I look at this and I say, students have forgotten there's a question here. They're looking at the documents, they're talking about the documents, but it's as if there were no question that this was being based upon. Don't forget the question. Every document must be related to it. It must be used to answer the question. That's what we really mean by document-based question. It's not a document question. By the way, I've heard students say that. The document question. No, document-based question. That you use the information and the attitudes in the document to answer the question. Analyze. You'll see this word in the instructions on the test. You'll see it repeated again and again in various questions. What does it mean? When we say analyze, we're explaining why something happens, why things are the way you say they are. You're not just repeating things. It's not just a list of facts. That's what a high school course does. For you to get advanced placement credit, you must show that you have taken this course on a college level. On a college level, you don't just repeat things. It's not just a bunch of facts. You've heard the expression, one darn thing after another. That's not history. Real history is analysis. When you look at something, what does this explain? How did this happen? What did this cause? When the word analyze is used in questions, that's what it's looking for. And even when it is not used, it is implied. Don't just repeat facts. Always analyze. POV, the point of view. In analyzing documents, you must explain why. Why what? Why the authors believe they are saying what they are saying in the document. Sometimes this can be fairly simple. Let's return again to that question on Muslim and Christian attitudes towards trade. Why, in the early years, did Muslims have very different attitudes towards trade than the Christians had? Mohammed was a merchant, an honest merchant. He had tremendous respect for other honest merchants. Christ and his early followers all came from the lower working or peasant class. They did not trust merchants. They regarded merchants as people who were ripping them off. And many of the early Christians, this was their attitude. Now you're getting into why. Why did the early Christians have a very different attitude than the early Muslims? That this is the point of view. The person is saying this. Why are they saying this? And why, if you go back, it's a very good DBQ to practice on. If you go back and you look at the later Christians, were often merchants themselves. And they were accepting of merchants. The later Muslim scholars, it was just the opposite. They were seeing a great deal of cheating in trade, and they had much less trust from them. So you'd say, over time, the Muslim scholars, because they were seeing a great deal of corruption, the Muslim scholars were less trusting of the merchants and wealth. But over time, the Christians, needing money, made accommodations with merchants. Now you're getting into the point of view, not just what the people said, why did they say it? This we do in casual conversation. When somebody is talking to you, have you ever used the expression, where are you coming from? And when the person gives a little bit of their background, then you understand why they're saying what they're saying. That's the same skill you have to use in these documents. Don't just repeat them. Do you know one of the worst things that students do? I've had students, 8 documents. There will be 8 quotations from the document. And people will tell you what that quotation means. Nothing about the attitudes. Long quotations from the document don't help you. Don't look for repeating the document. That's not going to do you any good. What will do you good is interpreting it, analyzing it, and looking at the point of view. Grouping documents. When you saw the breakdown of the scoring, you saw you get 1 point for grouping the documents in an intelligent manner. That helps to answer the question. Place all documents with similar opinions in one paragraph. That's the best way to do it. Muslim attitudes towards merchants. I think there were 4 documents for that. I think there were 4 on Christians. There you have all 8 documents used in 2 separate paragraphs. Then, there are other ways of grouping them. You can then say, those who praised the merchants, and list them, and get into a little bit of an explanation on them, and those who disapproved of merchants. if you're writing real paragraphs. Now, what do we mean by writing a real paragraph? Well, let's go back to what those English teachers told you. You write a good topic sentence to begin a paragraph that introduces the principal idea of that paragraph. You then have within that paragraph the documents that support that point that you're making in the topic sentence. If you do that in your DBQ, you will find you're grouping your essay, you're grouping your documents within the essay, and in an intelligent manner. It's following from that topic sentence. If you end up with 3 or 4 body paragraphs, each one making a different point, and using all of the documents, and perhaps 1 or 2 of them falling into more than one of those categories, you're going to have done a more than adequate job of placing the documents together with those of similar opinions. Use all the documents. Remember that point? You can't lose points. If you misuse a document, it's the same as not having mentioned it at all. It does not take away from your score. It is the same as if you had not used it. Scores jokingly refer to it as the additive method. You're adding up the points. You never can subtract anything. When it comes to the test, if you remember, you must get all 7 of the basic core points before you're eligible to get 1 or 2 of the expanded core. What is the single deficiency most common for the students who get up to 6 points in that basic core and then not get to the 7th? It is the additional document. What document not given would help you answer the question if it were given? You can't say, I'd like another document from a Muslim merchant. No. That's not an additional document. It's something that's not there. Again, using that same DBQ on the Muslim and Christian merchants. When scoring that DBQ for the College Board, most of the students who moved from the basic core into the expanded core, over half of them, said, you know what's missing here? We have no objective account. I would like something from a non-Muslim and non-Christian commenting on the Christian and Muslim merchants. For example, Jewish merchants, an Armenian merchant maybe, who wasn't part of the Western Church, or a Buddhist. But approximately half of them specifically said a Jewish merchant, giving me a more objective view. That's an additional source. And yes, it certainly would make you able to write a better essay. What are some of the other categories you should look at to see if it would help you? Are all the documents by men? A woman's view would help. There's an additional document. Someone from outside the area that they're discussing who had visited that area. That would help. Any minority that you see is relatively significant but not mentioned there in any of the documents, you would want something from them. It cannot be more of what is already there, but it is something that when you look back and say, if I had this, I could have done a better job of answering this question. By the way, there is no skill required on this test that is more like what real historians do than this. When historians go out and say, I must look for an additional source because I can't get a complete view of some period in history, this is precisely what they do. The DBQ's expanded core. Clear, complete, and analytical thesis. Use all documents persuasively. In other words, it's really helping to prove your thesis statement. Lots of point of view, outside material, multiple additional documents needed. When you look at these, what are they? They're the same thing that you found in the basic core, only on an expanded or more mature level, more complete. So that if you want to get into the expanded core, perhaps the biggest thing that you can do is start with a good thesis. Not just one that is acceptable, but when you're writing the essay, say, I'm going to come up with, from the very beginning, a clear, means one reading, and the reader can understand what you're saying. Complete, all things that are asked for in the question are there. Analytical, cause and effect is dealt with. If you do that right from the very beginning, you're coming up with more than an acceptable thesis. You're coming up with everything that you need for a good essay. If you base your entire essay then on your thesis, you're well on your way to writing a superior essay. Let's look at the other two. Change over time, or CCOT, change and continuity over time. A few years ago, this was just referred to as COT. And they changed it to CCOT because one of the things that they had in the instructions was you have to point out what is changing, but also what is staying the same. That's continuity. And because it was just called originally just COT, many students were forgetting to bring in both continuity. Don't you forget to do that. What does it do? It deals with a single category of people, or country, or a region, and asks analysis of how that changed and or, usually and, remained the same over a certain period of time. What remained the same? What changed? Not just what, why. That's the analysis. Okay, let's look at the rubric for the CCOT. Again, like the DBQ, an acceptable thesis. At least. Remember, the best way to make sure you have an acceptable thesis is write a superior thesis from the very beginning. Then 2 points if you're addressing all parts of the question. If you look carefully, most questions have 5 to 7 things that you must include. Make sure you get them in your essay. Or 1 point if you only discuss half of them or more than half of them. Now, that's just for discussing them. Supporting the thesis with evidence, going beyond mentioning. You're now using evidence to prove the points you're making in your thesis. You get 2 points for that. Or if you're only doing it partially, again, that usually means half or more than half of the things that were required in the question. All right, there's 1, 3, 5 points. 6th point, use the evidence to explain continuity and change. I have found in most cases if students get the 2 points for the parts addressed, and they're also getting this, but every now and then you get somebody who they forget the word analysis, and they aren't using it to support the question. They're just talking about it. Remember, that's fine in a high school course. This is college level. And then analysis. That why did things remain the same? Or why did they change? That's how you get the seventh point here. The expanded core for the CCOT. Notice, like the DBQ, clear, analytical, and comprehensive. Again, analysis, abundant evidence. Just as in the DBQ, you had to make abundant use of your documents. Here you're bringing in more than just the minimal amount of evidence, which means facts from history, and then links with relevant trends of the times. Okay. That's the expanded core. Again, like the DPQ, it's very much the same things you are asked to do in the basic core, just doing it on a much better level. Most students who get the basic core get at least one of those two expanded core points. It's only a small portion of them who, when they get up to 7, are stuck at 7. Scores call it stuck at the gate. Going into the expanded core is going through the gate. So there are some that they're doing everything minimally, but not too many. Usually it's the thesis that is very good. That there'll be a very good thesis there, which is what helped them do everything that they needed for that basic core. Now is the thing that gives them the first of the points in the expanded core. The third of the essays, comparative. Compares two or more groups, countries, or regions within a single time period. You'd say this is fairly similar to the change over time, except it's limiting it to one period. What is changing is going from one group of people, often one region, to another region, rather than changing the time period. The basic core points for that. Again, look how similar this is to the change over time. Acceptable thesis, addressing all parts of the question, gets 2 points, 1 point. That's exactly the same. Supports the thesis with appropriate evidence. That's exactly the same. And only in the last 2 points does it start to get very different. At least one direct comparison. What does that mean? Let us say the question is comparing China and India on some question. Many students will describe China, and then they'll describe India. And they'll stop. What you want to be certain you're doing is periodically making direct comparisons. Buddhism started out in India. When it got to China, it mixed with some of the Chinese ideas. So that Buddhism, although in both places, notice the continuity, it was practiced in a very different manner in China and in India. There you have, and then you've also included a little bit of analysis. There you go. Why? Well, because every society reflects and alters anything that comes into that area in terms of their own society. Lao Tzu and Confucius were unknown in India. But when the ideas of Buddha came into China, they altered some of those ideas. Let's go back to that thesis statement. If you notice, for all three of the essays, you must have a thesis statement. Now, you get a good English teacher, they'll tell you this is repetitious. A thesis is a statement, okay. But most people do call it thesis statement. All three essays demand it. What makes a good thesis? What is an unacceptable thesis? A good thesis, as we pointed out, says something. It goes beyond what is just in the question. An unacceptable thesis limits itself to merely repeating the question, or it does not say anything. We're emphasizing and re-emphasizing this because we find very, very few decent essays don't have a good thesis. The thesis is often the controlling influence on everything that follows. Analysis. Let's look again at that. How do you analyze? To historically analyze is to explain why something is what you say it is, or explain how something caused something. Analysis addresses cause and effect. Remember, that's what makes this a college course. That's what makes your AP essay an AP essay and not just a high school essay. It gets into that why. How does it change? Why is it changing? How are they the same? How are they different? Why are they the same? Why are they different? If you're going to sit down and you say, I want to practice with a few of my friends how to write a good essay, doing it in a small group and constantly interrupting each other and saying, why? Why is this? Why is Africa like the Caribbean? How is it different? Why is it different? Why is he saying this? You're getting into analysis. That's the difference between high school world history and college level world history. To write good essays on the AP test, you have to be writing college level essays. Remember, you have an hour and 10 minutes for all three essays. 50 minutes for the DBQ, 40 for the change over time, 40 for the comparative. Why is it so important to remember that you are not to go overtime on any essay? Because this is really the only place on the test you can really mess yourself up by doing that. When you open your answer booklet and they say, now you can begin, they will tell you 50 minutes later, you should be moving on to your second essay. 40 minutes after that, they will tell you, you should be moving on to your third essay. When practicing for this test, limit yourself to those times. Get a feel for those times. What I have found again and again in scoring these essays is I will see a tremendous amount of work done on the DBQ. A so-so job done, whatever the essay they answer second. And the third essay, it is not uncommon for me to see 2 or 3 sentences. And that's all they have for the third. Why? They ran out of time. Which essay is worth the most? They're of equal value. If you spend all the time trying to turn a DBQ that would be worth 5 into 6, and as a result of that, you don't get any points for the third essay you're doing something very foolish. Stick to the times that are advised. It is done after careful research, and students who discipline themselves do better on that. Yes, everybody wants to write a perfect essay, but writing one perfect essay, one mediocre essay, and then not answering the third one at all is definitely devastating to your grade. How to review. The last thing that we're going to look at in detail here. Go to AP Central, download the curriculum outline, and in that, remember again, there's a practice test there, which is the actual test from 2002. There are also other practice questions that you can have access to there. There is the basic map of the regions. Absorb all of that. You'll see Some of it repeats what I'm doing here, although not as complete. But when it comes to the regions, they do an even more complete job. Then use your notes. Take that curriculum. I really think you should print the curriculum up. Again, it's only 10 pages long. Print the curriculum up. Everything that is there in that curriculum, you are responsible for. They will not ask anything that is not there. On the 2002 test, they accidentally asked a multiple choice question that did not come from that curriculum. Teachers complained. Within hours of the test, the decision had been made by the College Board to cancel that question. Everybody got credit for it. If it's not in that curriculum, it's not going to be on the test. If, on the other hand, you find things in that curriculum you aren't familiar with, you better get some background on it. All right, where are you going to get that background? Go back to your class notes. And here, if you work with several students together, several of you have your notes there. Then go to the textbook. Then go to review books. There's some very good review books out, and some not so good. The Princeton review book and the one by Kaplan are both written by people who have scored the Advanced Placement World History Test. And there are people who are well respected in the community. Some of the other review books are pretty good. There's really only one, I won't name it, that does a terrible job on the types of questions that you would be asked on this. But even that is fairly good on developing the curriculum. But those two especially, they're written by people who are very well respected by the other scorers on the AP test. The information, the advice they give you is very, very practical. So you combine your notes, your textbook, and information from the review books. And you could add to that, go online. You can't find something? Go online. Wikipedia can help you, or anything else. Then, I think one of the big mistakes that students take is they feel uncertain about themselves, and they want practice tests. Practice tests. You take one good practice test. Again, the one on AP Central. It's the real thing. It's not just trying to imitate it. This is the real thing. They do not repeat multiple choice questions. They do not repeat in detail the essay questions. Taking additional tests will not make you more able to answer the questions they're going to. Getting a feel for the type of questions, a feel for the way they treat material, that you could do with one test. So reviewing through AP Central, reviewing by your notes, your textbook, and review books, and going online, very good. Finally, for most students, cooperative study. You probably know that when you start to review for a test, you reach a point where you start to glaze over. And work that you do beyond that doesn't really help you. You find yourself not able to concentrate and afterwards not remembering. One of the ways to get around that and to make the time that you spend reviewing more effective is you get with other good students. Now, by good, I don't mean brilliant. I mean students who really care. They will help to keep you more alert. Their notes will supplement your notes. Maybe you get one review book, they'll get another review book, and you can start consulting there. Also, this is an excellent way for correcting your own misconceptions. You start to review and you think you understand something about Africa. And actually, you don't realize it, but you're limiting it just to East Africa. if you're working with good students, they're going to say, you know, what you're saying isn't true of West Africa. And you say, well, I don't really know the difference between East and West Africa. You find this is where the other student becomes a check upon yourself and you upon his work or her work. Let's run back through all of this material one quick time. Okay. You know what the course is all about. The regions. You know that. Where can you find the regions? Here. Go to AP Central. apcentral.collegeboard.com. Now that we've finished presenting this whole thing, you can see how important that is. Look up the world history course, download the curriculum, print up that map of the regions, and use it. The world regions, again, that you've got to do on your own. None of the textbooks do an adequate job of this. None of them. You have to use that map at AP Central, and you have to supplement it. The periods. Be aware of what's happening in each period. How can you use this periodization in a review? Go back and take each one of those regions and describe them. This you can do as a group. This is where group. How did they differ from the first unit to the second unit? What changed? Why did it change? Again, get that why in there. There's your analysis. Follow it through all the way. Then go to another region. Emphasis, point of view, continuities and differences, analysis. See that we keep coming back to that. And the use and interpretation of documents. Remember, you're not just repeating documents. Remember, long quotes from documents don't do you any good. The best essays will take a word or two from a document, seldom even a complete sentence. We're looking for interpretation. We're looking for analysis. We're looking for use. Yes, scorer sits down and looks at it. Yes, I know you can copy a sentence from a piece of paper. That's not what a DBQ is all about. Test, you know when it is. The breakdown of the test. When you first start, you're going to spend about half an hour filling out a whole bunch of forms and labels. And then you start on the 70 multiple choice questions. Remember the three essays. Now remember the breakdown. Remember what we should be learning from this. Half of your score is the multiple choice. My experience has been this. If students consistently prepare for essays and consistently learn the material they need so that they can give evidence in answering all three of these, the multiple choice will take care of themselves. The material, remember your review. Don't leave anything out. All 5 periods are of almost equal importance. Remember the multiple choice. Don't let yourself get bogged down. You have 70 questions to do in 55 minutes. That's plenty of time unless you end up spending too much time on questions that aren't worth it. You don't want to wrestle with a question and after 5 minutes on that question, be fairly sure you've gotten it right, and then leave 5 questions undone that you could have answered in 10 seconds each. You don't want that to happen. Remember the penalty. 1 quarter-point penalty for each wrong answer. No wild guesses. But again, if you can eliminate some of the answers, then guess among those that are left. Remember, no choice in the essays. But you will usually have a choice within the essay. Don't panic if there is no choice. it's going to be a fairly easy topic. If you're prepared for the test, you don't have to worry about going into it. Are they going to ask me the one thing I don't know? No, not going to happen. Remember, the basic scoring for everything. 7 points for the basic core, 2 points for the expanded core. Remember, you can't get anything in the expanded core if you don't get all 7 points in the basic core. Let's pause here. What do you think the typical score on an essay is? Do you know, for most of the years that I've been scoring, DBQ, the typical document-based question, the typical score is between 4 and 5. For the other two, it's 2 to 3. That's all. Why should I point this out? I find one of the problems that fairly good students have going into the test is because they're good students, they're conscientious, they doubt themselves. You don't have to do something magic in order to do well on this test. Take the multiple choice, for example. Do you know the typical student who gets a 5, who finishes in that top 10 to 20% taking the test, they only get 80% of the multiple choice right? Yeah, there are hard questions in there. But everybody's getting those hard questions. Everybody is working under pressure. And so you would say there's a curve to this. If you can get 80% of the multiple choice questions right, you're on your way to a 5. If you get 2/3, 67% of the multiple choice right, you're on your way to a 4. And anyone who gets half of the multiple choice right is probably going to get a 3 or better on the test. Half. Don't panic. You're going to see 2 or 3 questions that across the country, only 15 or 20% of the students will get it right. So there are going to be those questions that when you see them, skip them. Go on. Worry about getting to that 2/3 right or 80% right. Don't think you have to be perfect. Don't panic. And the same thing with the essays. Think of it. If you write for all 3 of the essays a good statement of thesis, and then you concentrate on answering everything that is asked for in the question, and being a little analytical in it, you're probably going to end up with 5 on each of the essays. If you got 5 on all 3 essays, or 4 on 1 and 2 5s, and you got 80% of your multiple choice right, you'd get a 5 on the test. Should you be panicking? No. Relax. Panic doesn't help. Working conscientiously does. Remember the DBQ. If you look at one of the documents and you're saying, I'm not sure I'm getting this right, remember how the scoring works. It's additive. You can't lose points. Don't leave a document out. Take your chance. What's the worst thing that could happen? You completely misinterpret one document and the person scoring the test gets a chuckle out of it. But you don't lose anything. The score will end up exactly the same as if you had left that document out. If that's the only document that you didn't have right, you would be getting that point for you using all of the documents. And finally, what if you get it right? Even though you're not sure of it, you get it right, you analyze it, then you're on your way to the expanded core. So don't leave any of the documents out. Remember the scoring of it. Again, use all the documents. Remember, be analytical. And don't forget that need for the additional document. Do not say, I want more of what's already here. Remember the thesis. When I teach in a classroom, when I teach how to write essays, I spend more time on thesis than anything else. If you write a good thesis, and then, it is, for looking at the expanded core, if it's complete, if it's analytical, if it is including everything that should be there and is analyzing it, if that then becomes the organizing principle for the rest of your essay, you've written a darn good essay. And the work, the extra work that you did on that thesis will be rewarded, and it will make the paragraphing that follows much more easy. So when you're practicing in a group saying, let's out loud compose an essay. You'll find the most important thing that you do to put together a very good essay is coming up with that acceptable thesis from the very beginning. Remember that. No laundry list. You're there to use the documents, not just refer to them. Use. Don't just repeat the document. Use them for what? To answer the question. Answer the darn question. That's why it's called a DBQ, not just a document description. Analyze. Remember, this is college level. Consistently, everything that you do, explain why. Okay, I think that has pretty much summed up everything that you have to remember for this test. Do it with friends, not the class clown. Break the job up, use your notes, use your textbook, use a good review book, and enjoy it. With your friends, you should have a friendly competition getting ready for this. Some of my best students used to have a pizza party review. They would sit down and they'd say, we're going to go through the first time period. At a certain point, we're going to call and order a pizza. But we're not going to start eating the pizza until we finished all of our work. So at a certain point, they ordered the pizza, and then they push on through to make sure they finish the work. And then they sit and relax at the end over the pizza. They say they're going to talk about everything. You know what they end up talking about? They say, we end up talking about the test. Make this a productive but enjoyable experience. It's a great test. It's something that you can really be proud of if you do well on. It's not something that should intimidate you. Learn something for your life. When you talk to somebody, when will they understand you? When you start by presenting a thesis. When will you be well understood? When you analyze, not just repeat. This is the test that gets you there. Enjoy the experience.